Hey, it's Brayden, and I'm here with Logan, and this is.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me you built a time machine? My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates. Now just sit here, do something! Health, sleep, murder.
Absolutely.
Gobsmacked.
And today we do have a special guest. Really looking forward to this. We have with us John Dorsey. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing all right. I am still moving slow from the amount of turkey and stuffing I've eaten in the past 24 hours, and I'm probably going to take a nap after this, so I'm looking forward to it.
That's my line.
Yeah, so Logan usually likes to take a nap after the show too. So you guys have that in common. But really looking forward to this. I know myself and Logan, this is our first interview on the show, and really cool that you were able to take the time to come on the show. So thank you for that. First of all, I want to give you a congratulations. I know you're going to be a father coming up soon. Is that correct?
I am. I'm going to have my firstborn son in like, oh my God, like 23 days if the schedule holds. So
how's the feeling on that? You excited? You nervous?
You know, I am excited. The only thing that kind of that wigs me out is just like money. That's it. I just want to make sure kid has everything he could want. But otherwise, like, you know, I have a house, a car, a job most of the time. So, you know, I've kept a dog alive all these years. How hard could a kid be?
I'd say a dog is much harder to take care of. They have to train them a little bit more, but yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to letting a child just run wild.
Some people do that, so
True.
I mean, to each their own.
Yeah.
Speaking of job, that's kind of why we wanted to ask you some questions. You have an interesting job. Definitely something I wish I had. So what is it? You're a prop master. You're an art director. What is your job usually?
So I'm an all around kind of like art department guy. I hesitate to use the term prop master. I've done the job before, but
okay.
So, you know, if you're listening and, you know, next time you watch a TV show or a movie, and then it gets to the part where you'll see like props or art department, that's generally what I do for a living. Okay. But I'd say my main hustle these days is I'm a prop guy. So easiest way to explain that is, well, one, if somebody's touched it, it's a prop. And if it's like something they sit on, that's set dressing. So like that's a thing, you know, because everybody calls everything props, which drives me crazy. But number two, kind of the easiest way to explain what my job is, if you ever see like a glass of water, you know, in a movie and the level goes up and down and, you know, you're like, oh God, why didn't they do anything about that? Well, I'm the guy that screwed that up.
So in Jurassic Park, when the water's vibrating, that's you.
Actually, oh my God, you want to get into it? Let's get into it. So like stuff like that would actually be special effects.
Right.
Like it's really weird. So like movies are kind of like watches. Like movies are watches are like a team sport. Like everybody has their job, and kind of the bigger the movie gets, like the more like your focus kind of gets smaller. Like small movies, you know, have smaller crews and they take on like way more jobs, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of like on bigger movies, like, you know, to make sure everything happens on time, because, you know, it's like, you know, it's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars a day. You know, someone else will take it. So kind of like when you think about special effects in a movie, you normally think about like, you know, things on fire or things that are exploding or, you know, but they also handle all the things that you like really wouldn't think about at all, you know, and like a cup of water vibrating, like that's for sure a special effects thing, like water coming out of a faucet, because, you know, movie sets don't have full plumbing in them. Like never use a bathroom on a movie set. That's that'll ruin everybody's day. But having water come out of a faucet or out of drains, like that's what they handle. So like a prop guy, if you see like a cop in a movie, so like their clothes, that's costume, but then
Right.
like say their badge and then their name tag and their cop belt and the gun, they're all props. And then if you want to get even more crazy, if they draw the gun, that will be props, but that'll be an armorer who kind of like it's their job to make sure that guns work and that they're safe. So it gets really, it gets broken out in a way to make sure that everything's done correctly. And then really it's all about getting everything done on time, because the most expensive thing on a movie set is time. Like
Yeah.
that comes for us all.
Okay. Wow. So I'm looking at your IMDb credits. How did you get started? Because you've been doing this for about 10 years, correct?
Yeah, so I went to school at the Savannah College of Art and Design, and I originally wanted to be like a cartoonist or somebody working for Marvel. And I very I very quickly found out that drawing comics while it's fun, it's not something I'd want to do for a living. And it's because you're sitting at a desk for like 12 hours a day. And then you're like, yay, I have a page done. And that's not even with color. And I took a screenwriting class and I was like, wow, this is great. I'm going to be a screenwriter for a living, which is like, very ridiculous. Well, I mean, it's a ridiculous want. So when I graduated, I had this film degree, which, by the way, you don't need to work in the movie industry. In fact, it's never really helped me out. You don't need to know who Federico Fellini is to be a grip, right?
I see.
You just need a good attitude. So, when I got out, I knew I wanted, like, I have to do something with my degree. I'm not going to go to school and work at Starbucks for the rest of my life. And the way I broke in, and this is not the way everybody does it. Like no one's story is the same. Like there is no good way to break into the industry. There's certainly things that can help you. And I wound up finding a movie job on like Craigslist where they were like internship for movie shooting in Annapolis. So I applied, the guy called and was like, can you be here tonight? And, wound up packing an overnight bag and leaving. And it kind of got started from there. And I wound up in the art department because they were like, what are you good at? And I was like, I'm good at drawing. And they're like, cool, you're in the art department. And I've been there ever since.
They kind of just threw you in there? They didn't like give you a test or anything?
Well, I was talking on another podcast where somebody brought up the fact, like, when you think about the movie industry, it kind of seems glamorous, but it's closer to being a blue collar job than a white collar job. So, I'll have days where like I'm covered in dirt by the end of it, like just dust and dirt and sweat. And don't get me wrong, like movie sets are fun places to work. We have a crafty table. Like we, as a part of our union deal, like we have a table of snacks. Like that is a guaranteed in our job, which, like nobody gets. So I'm not going to complain about that. But, we have guys that we have carpenters that work with us and people who are painters that like paint houses, like when they're not working on movie sets. Like there is an entire department of that. So, it sounds sexy, but for the most part, like it is a job. Yeah. It's a cool job, but it's still a job.
Interesting. Okay. It seems like the last few years, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like your projects have gotten more well known as far as the size and scale of some of the movies and shows you've worked on.
Yeah. And, remember that the industry is like more than just TV and movies. Like when I first started out, I was working on indie movies and then also commercials. I still do a fair amount of commercials. I art directed 2 masterclass things, one with Kevin Spacey and the other with Bob Woodward, which sounds huge, but it's really, not as involved. It was very stressful, but for a while I was in the commercial side, but I got into this to like make make stories, and I've been pretty lucky to sort of fall in with certain crews, and I've been able to work more on the TV side, and TV's fun to work on because you kind of get to you work with people for a while, you get to know them, and it's cool to see a story from the beginning to the end.
I see. Okay.
So, most recent project was the Good Lord Bird down in Richmond, which is this like Western series about a young boy who's freed from slavery by John Brown, and it's very cool. That was the most fun I've ever had on a movie set.
Wow. Okay, that's really cool. That's interesting. So do you have any? Well, first of all, I wanted to ask, what is a masterclass? You mentioned masterclass. What is that?
It's a video series where people who are experts in their field will teach you like a, for lack of a better term, like college course.
Okay.
But I've also, I've done commercials for like Mountain Dew. There was like Bradley Beal of the Wizards starred in one of those commercials. I made a gun. I mean, I made a money gun to like shower him with like $3 bills. It was like fake $3 bills with like his face on it.
Is that your idea or
no?
Okay.
That was well, the gun was my idea because they were like, we're going to shower people with money, and normally they would build sets for stuff like this, but they were doing this on location, so we needed a way to make money rain down on people, and instead of building like some sort of frame that we could drop it from, I got a leaf blower and then made like a cardboard funnel that went under it, so you'd kind of sprinkle the fake money or just like up and down the tube, and then when you turned on the leaf blower, it would shoot it over whoever you wanted it to sprinkle down on. I mean, it looked all right. It wasn't the most complicated thing in the world, but every once in a while you have to sort of MacGyver something like that.
That's interesting. Wow.
So your work is more closely related to Adam Savage, as far as doing the artwork, doing the prop work, building things like that, but not as far as doing the special effects, correct? Like stuff that's functional but not really crazy.
Yeah. So for the most part, I don't get to make as much things that I'd want. And say you're watching like Star Wars and you see all those like really highly specialized props because laser guns don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But there are people out there who create those things. The people that are on set are sometimes those folks. For the most part, a prop guy has to like find everything, right? So, here's an example from like another movie. Like I needed a dead dog that was like, a dog that had been like run over, right? And like, you can't just kill a dog for more than one reason. So like, there are companies out in LA that you can, get taxidermied animals from. And, you'd be surprised at the amount of things that are, done on movies. Like for instance, this is like a small detail. So I worked on the basis of sex when it came to DC, and all their cars, which also, by the way, none of this work made it into the movie, but one of the things that you have to do is you make sure that things are like historically accurate. So for a day, I had to find out like, okay, what does a license plate from this time period look like? Because also all the license plates you see in movies, those are licenses, those are numbers that are dedicated to movie use, so that if you see a license plate in a movie, you can't just like follow that person home. Right. So basically every plate you see is like fake. And then, also finding out what did the window sticker look like, on that same movie, we had a very particular type of police officer. So I had to like look up archival footage of like cops for, God, what was that? I can't remember which building, but it's a lot of research and then trying to find said object, right?
Right.
And on the good Lord Bird, like John Brown, who's like this real historic figure, and this was set before the Civil War, so my boss on that had to find all of these either reproduction weapons or like sometimes the real thing, so like guns that are like over 100 years old, and some of them, like we had one gun that was like worth $14,000, and we just like put it on actor and just like, all right, I hope you don't break it.
That's what
Wow.
insurance is for.
Oh yeah. Oh my god. It's so terrifying. Because like some of this stuff like doesn't exist anywhere else, and like we're just throwing it around places. We're not throwing it around, but it's just like this is stuff that should be in a museum sometimes.
Wow.
But
Do you
that's-
have more fun working with? Sorry to interrupt you. Do you have more fun working on movies that are more historical? Like,
I've only done one, and for me it was a blast because I got to learn how to do like black powder weapons, and I was even like one of the background extras shooting back at the good guys at one point because
Oh, wow.
like I'd gotten training. I mean, you can't even see who I am. I'm like a little blob where a little puff of smoke pops up, but it's every project is interesting in its own way. That one was cool because a lot of my coworkers were also like historians in a lot of ways. So, just sitting around with these guys doing busy work, like they'd tell me about this, the time period that we were in, and like, who this person was and how that could relate to other things. And, and who doesn't like a good, cowboy show? Like it was awesome. Like there were horses, rearing up, and, fires being set. Like it was cool. And, if you'd asked me right after I worked on Wonder Woman, like, was that awesome? I'd be like, that was the coolest job in my life. Right. Like it's always moving,
So speaking of Wonder Woman, you did work on the upcoming Wonder Woman, the sequel. That's got to be really cool. I mean,
dude, I can't tell you anything about
Okay.
the plot because,
Right.
well, I can tell you this.
Mhm.
So that thing was so massive, and they had us, like, normally we get emailed all our information about how the day's going to go. And on that movie, we had actually an app on our phone so that they keep everything secret, so that like, somebody doesn't drop a piece of paper and all of a sudden, like,
Wow.
paparazzi, not that there were any, but like, can pick it up and something gets leaked from the movie. And one dude, took a screenshot on his phone, and he was like, it can't be that secret. Did that, and then his phone rang, and there was somebody on the other line that was like, delete that photo. And he was like, oh my god, deleted it from his phone. But it was like
Wow.
huge. Like I've never seen anything bigger, and it's kind of cool to see like, oh, there's Wonder Woman on her cell phone. It's kind of cool.
Wow. What is your interaction with celebrities? Like, for example, Wonder Woman. Do you get to communicate with them at all?
If I do, I'm not like buddy with them.
Yeah.
For the most part, like most people are just there to work. It's never really negative. Like even if it is, like it's like any job where you might snap at a coworker. So like you hear anybody that you've heard like a horror story about, it's probably true or not. I don't know, but but for the most part, like like Ethan Hawke, he was in The Good Lord Bird. He was awesome. Robin Wright was pretty cool on House of Cards. I propped Kevin Spacey a couple of times. I never really had any interactions other than like, hey, here's your paperwork. And he'd be like, thank you. And then walk away from me. So like,
Okay.
for the most part,
It was very professional.
Everybody's professional. A couple of people, like I've never had, a couple of people like, oh, I got to joke around with, one of Chris Pratt. Yeah. Like I had a buddy who like joked with Chris Pratt on a set. I have another friend who was like Shaq did his voicemail because like they got along on set.
Mm.
But for the most part, it's it's just a job to those guys.
Okay.
And like I'm freaking out because like I worked on something where Omar from The Wire was on it.
Hmm.
And like I was just geeking out the entire time. Like on The Good Lord Bird, I was geeking out. Like I'm a huge Ethan Hawke fan, and he's just like, "Hello," and I'm like, I think you're awesome. I love your movies, but you can't say that. Like you're gonna weird them out. So
Yeah.
instead, I'm just like in the corner squeaking, like,
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't imagine like meeting some of these celebrities and acting normal. Yeah, it's got to be tough. That's got to be the toughest part of your job, right?
it goes away. Like first time I was on set with Kevin Spacey, I like froze up. But that was also, he's like the biggest actor in the world at that point. Like
Mhm.
this was when like House of Cards was like huge.
Right.
And, since then I will, like I'll get times where I have like ice water running through my veins because I'm like a huge fan of said actor. But then, it's like anything else. You're just like, all right, I'm going to play cool. I'm going to do my job, keep my head down. And you get used to it.
That's cool. What about like your interactions with directors? Do you like Patty Jenkins? Do you speak with her more, or do you
So,
communicate with her at all?
no. I'm not big enough potatoes for that. So, movies like anything that's like DC or Marvel, those things are huge. And they'll have like a central crew that deals with like, with, with the actors and sometimes the directors, but on something that big, I've never heard of like Chris Nolan being like, "Hey, prop guy, I need this thing."
Okay.
But on TV shows, like they're your boss. So if there have been times where they've like told me what to do, but generally they'll deal with like my bosses or whoever. So like the assistant prop master, when you see that credit when you see that title in the movie credits, usually that's the person who's on set. It's very rare to have an on-set prop master anymore because they're usually trying to work ahead and kind of get other props, get other things set up, do paperwork. The amount of paperwork you have to do as on movies is it's not sexy. It's a very necessary part of the business, but like when you think about it, you think it's like, yeah, I get to go shop and do it. No, you're like writing purchase orders and like putting stuff into Excel. And you're like, I'm in the movie industry, right? This feels like an accountant's job, but um, a lot of the times that I don't know, it's usually good. Well, I'm just saying that like there is this kind of like myth around directors being kind of like tough, and a couple of them are. I've known people who have worked on like David Fincher movies,
Hmm.
and like everybody's afraid of that dude. But the reason why you're afraid of that dude is because he knows how to do your job.
Right.
Like he came up in the commercial world. Like I, one of my buddies on set who's like a scenic person, so he's the on-set painter. So like if somebody scuffs a wall, he's the guy who like runs in with a little brush and kind of like very quickly matches the paint so that we don't notice it, right? And they were working on the pilot of House of Cards, and David Fincher like is looking at the monitor, and he called this dude over, and he's like, "There's a nail head right there," and he like pointed at just like basically a pixel on the screen,
Jeez.
and he was like, and then walked, and lo and behold, there was a screw that hadn't gotten covered by the normal scenic department. And like, everybody seems to have a story like this with that dude. And like, that guy is rare. For the most part, a director shows up and is just like drinking a Starbucks and looking at a script and just trying to make his day, right? Like, a lot of them are just working folks. And then there's a couple of people who are like, weird. But like, like Patty Jenkins, like she was cool. Like it was really neat. She was, very level headed, very calm. And like, it's a huge production. Like I don't want that job. That's so scary. Like the amount of pressure there. And she was just, she was just shooting her movie, giving feedback to actors. You kind of tell that she's a mom because like they'd be like, "Oh, I had an idea," and she'd very kind of like deftly like listen to them, be like, "Okay, but we're gonna do it this way." Um,
That's cool.
it's trust me, ridiculous things happen, just not as often as the sort of legend of filmmaking would have you believe they do, right?
So basically, your job is more akin to like a beat cop, where it sounds really glorified, but really you're just pulling people over for speeding tickets and doing a
Yeah.
lot of paperwork.
Oh my god, yeah. Like a lot of the like it's just yeah. Like there are days that are beyond crazy cool, and then dude, I've been standing in rain making fake rain for a movie before, and that was on my
Oh, wow.
birthday. So like sometimes it's like awesome, other times it's like just monotonous, and I'm standing there thinking like, why did I do this to myself? I could have gotten a normal job that had retirement.
Do you ever think about a career switch?
All the time. I just
Okay.
don't know what I'd do. I'm good at like I'm okay at a bunch of things, but I'm good at nothing. Right? So and like I've done this for 10 years. Like nobody what job do you think is like I want a prop guy from the movie business, but for nothing nothing entertainment related? It's like no, nobody's asking for that guy.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So I get that. IMDb says you're working on the upcoming Tom Clancy movie. Is that true?
So I did their DC unit because that's not out. I can't say anything other than Michael B. Jordan is just like, is a cool dude. He's
Nice.
just like walks in the room and you're like, that guy's cool. And he's like, yeah, I know it. And he's like, all right, dope. Here's your gun, man. Yeah, that job. It was very cold when it shot. So like it wasn't that bad, but it was so cold when we shot.
Wow. Logan, do you have any? I know Logan had a lot of questions he has got to ask.
Well, and actually, you've answered a lot of them. Stuff like one of the big ones that I wanted to ask was, do you have to have like weapons experience? But you kind of already answered that with having an armor. But you do have to still go find those guns, right? You're the one that finds the actual props, but they're just the ones that make sure that the action still works and everything, right?
Well, so that's something I can answer. So like yes and no. So if the gun is working, you're going to want somebody who has an armor experience, and generally they'll carry licenses that, like gun shop owners or gunsmiths would carry, because effectively that's what they are. Because most of the time they're just making sure that the gun can fire, because when you fire a blank, if you've gone to the range or have own guns yourself, like that when you fire a bullet, like it shoots the slide back, right? And it all works off of the fact that it's not only like gunpowder, but it's also just the force of the bullet leaving the chamber, right? But a blank has no bullet, and on top of that, you don't want to use as much gunpowder as a regular bullet would take. So you're blanks and stuff, things like that, are making guns work in ways they were never intended to. So there's a lot of fixing that has to happen there. So armorers will have a lot of experience. Some of them are like, one friend that I have, Justin, he's an armorer in the DC area, but more towards, Virginia, or no, I think he's up in Pennsylvania. I don't know. Don't listen to me. But anywho, this guy has a lot of experience. Like he buys and sells guns as like a side business. So like he has a ton of experience with that. But a lot of if you don't see the gun fire or most of the parts work on it, that's actually, sometimes it'll be like a training weapon. Sometimes it'll be like an airsoft, because like the airsoft guns that are coming out today are pretty good 1-to-1 replicas. Like I have one that it's a Glock, and it's a part of this like huge collection of like fake guns that I have. I mean, not huge, like modest. That it actually uses real real parts as a part of it, but the rest of it's just like a BB gun, right?
Mm.
But for all intents and purposes, like unless you're going to look right down the barrel, it's going to look like the real thing. And then if it never leaves the holster, that's probably a rubber. Like it's just a solid piece of black rubber, so that, you know, when you use guns in a movie, you have to let the local cops know, and they have to get a permit. Like, you know, being in the city, I've dealt with the DC Firearms Registration Office a lot. Like, they don't know me by name at this point, but except for like one of the guys in that office, and it's all about keeping people safe and making sure that other people don't freak out that you have a firearm on set. But, you know, I've had to track down some odd guns, like, you know, in like for Without Remorse. You know, this gives nothing away about the movie, but, you know, there's a bunch of guards that were using a gun that's like only available in a certain part of Europe, and like very weird to even find in the United States. And I had to track down like a single prop house I found had one they could make a mold of. And it's something that you kind of, you know, it's kind of like being a private detective for stuff.
Yeah. Because especially like with a lot of, I'm kind of a gun guy, not really big into it, but you know, I keep up with stuff, and for example, just Germany has this thing about giving guns to America. They're like, you're not German enough to own this gun, and so I could definitely see how that would be difficult to track down.
But the thing is that you can, like, that's the thing about the film business that's so ridiculous, is like, because it's so huge and everybody loves movies, is like you can get this information.
Wow.
And like it's out there. It's just you have to look for it a lot. And it's a lot of looking at photos, like finding where stuff is made and kind of going from there. I haven't had anything like, you know, like I've had to make, you know, paperwork for like stuff that's like top secret, right? So I've like had to look up, and then, you know, just because I live in the DC area, like I know a couple of people who, you know, do like securities and like Department of Defense stuff. So like I've been able to talk to them, and like without them like bringing, you know, obviously they're not going to break their clearance for some dumb film guy, but, you know, I'd be like, this is stuff I found on the internet. What's more real? And they'll be like, and then point at a thing, right?
Yeah, the lingo and such.
Yeah, and it's fun to track that stuff down.
That's really
You
cool.
know, it's rewarding for sure.
Okay. You're based out of DC. Do you usually only work on movies that are filmed in DC?
So I work kind of like Baltimore. I worked like Maryland, DC, Virginia, and I've worked in like Pennsylvania. I've worked New York before, but so in the industry, you know, again, next time you watch the movie credits, like at the end, you'll see this thing that says IATSE, and that's our union, which is like international. And then within the United States, it kind of covers certain like areas. So mine covers DC, Maryland, Virginia, and like parts of Delaware. There's another union, like one of the largest unions or film unions in the United States is Local 52, and that's New York and Pennsylvania. And you'll generally kind of like have a market, because while there are databases of crew members, like it's pretty much who you know, right? Like it'll be this like long line of telephone. Like a producer will call a UPM. The UPMs worked with this crew from a movie. They'll contact all the department heads, and the department heads will contact their crew members who might have the experience for said project, right? So it becomes this giant game of telephone in a way. But yeah, my work has been here. I gotta, you know, it's my home, and you know, I wouldn't be here if I didn't like it.
Yeah. It's one of those things where you have to like it to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, people fall into the film industry, but nobody works in the film industry because they have to, right? Like,
Yep.
At a certain, like, either you love it or you're just out.
Yeah. Okay. So, what was my other question? What's the difference between like first unit and second unit? Like your credits will say second unit.
All right. So first and second unit. Now, when you so when TV shows and movies are being made, think of it as this like train that's hurtling towards just a giant chasm, right?
Okay.
Like like you only have so much money and time in order to get everything, and sometimes in order to make sure that directors can get their shots, you'll have a second unit, and it's literally the idea being like we have another group of people shooting stuff on the same day, which is why it's called second unit. And sometimes third units happen, not like that's super duper rare. But second unit will typically handle things that like actors or like the movie actors aren't in. So like when you're watching like an action movie and then there's a lot of driving scenes or like stunts, like any of the Marvel movies you see where they're driving and whipping around cities and stuff like that, like they don't have the main director there. Sometimes they do, but for the most part, that's second unit because that will be, a bunch of stunt guys, and then it'll be like a bunch of stunt guys. Sometimes you'll have like directors who specialize in stunts and things like that because they know how to like shoot what they need in the amount of time they're given. So, when you see me as like I'm a part of second unit for that, sometimes it's because they brought a unit to DC just to get their DC shots for whatever project they're doing.
Gotcha. So it's yeah. I mean, I guess you've described it the best way possible.
Okay.
I mean, you're the guy to ask, anyways.
I mean, you can. Any person who's been in the industry can answer these, and they'll, being a prop guy, like I'm on set most of the time, which is, it's fun. You feel like you're a part of something that's alive, but like a camera person would certainly have a different way of looking at the industry. A producer is going to give you an even more detailed way of looking at it because they're also handling the money and whatever drama happens behind the scenes. It's it's vast.
Yeah. And so you're pretty not really stress free, but more drama free in your departments, right?
Sure. I mean, I make it sound like, dude, I've had stuff. No, sometimes it's you feel like you're covered in gasoline and driving through a forest fire. Like there are plenty of times where it's not great or just chaotic, and God only knows how we can do that. Like, is this thing going to break in the middle of a take? Oh no, this thing broke, or the thing you ordered isn't the right thing.
Oh wow.
I've been on shoots where all of a sudden discovered our supposedly fake guns were like training weapons, and it's just like, we can't have these. Just like everything is weird. There's always something. No matter how well you can plan it out, like something's going to go wrong, and you kind of get used to it. But I'm sure my already thinned hair was helped out by my career choice.
Gotcha. But and what I mean by drama is as far as like there's no like, people have horror stories, like you said, some might be true, some might not be, but you don't generally get into a lot of that. It's as far as your coworkers, there's not a lot of heat. I mean, there's stress, but there's not a lot of heat, right?
No, I mean, one of the things that's kind of nice is that if you because you're working with people so much, like there is it, since it's not a 9 to 5, like people blow up at each other, but unless you guys really don't like one another, like generally people will sort of be like, hey, I'm sorry, I was having a bad day, and it's like, yeah, I get it. Like there'll be beefs in departments. It's like any job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody likes all their coworkers. Like you're cool, bleep you, you're cool, like.
Yeah, and I worked in the water department in one of my local cities, and Yeah, there's a lot of office drama constantly. And Gully, my man, or not my foreman, because I was in the construction side of things. He was really cool. He's like, you know what? Just stay out of the office. Go hang out in the truck. Avoid the drama, and you'll do all right. And I was like, okay. I ended up leaving because of other reasons, but um, yeah, it sounds sounds about right.
Yeah. And also, like, you kind of learn to shake it off a little bit
Mm.
because the day, we're working like 12-hour days, 5 days a week, sometimes even longer. Like, you have to learn how to just not let it get to you sometimes.
Yeah, gotcha.
And that's a tough lesson to learn. It admittedly, it took me a while. And even to this day, I'll sometimes be like, I didn't like what that person said to me. Like,
I think that just makes us human. That happens.
yeah.
But makes
Wait.
you humble. Yeah.
Yeah, and one last question from me, at least. I know Brain probably still has more, but what was your worst day? And you don't have to describe who made you upset or whatever, but just your worst day on set. What
Oh
would have
my
been
God.
hands down?
So I am the bad guy with a story. So like I would
Oof.
when I was working well, I bit off more than I could chew, and like it almost like killed me in the industry because I was hired for this commercial, and they asked if I could build like a cantilever bench, which basically is like, if you see like a fashion shoot, they'll just be like this block coming out of nowhere, and somebody's sitting on it to like make it look cool, so they can take like whatever high contrast shadow. Who gives it? Just some dumb commercial. And then they also wanted a box, not like a giant Christmas present. And I made the bench and I made the box, and they were bad because I'm not a carpenter. And I like showed up with this, and the straight up just I don't even think they hated me, but I think it was just like I screwed the pooch so bad that like it was like I was covered in poo, and like everybody couldn't get away from me. Like everybody knew I stepped in it, and I was just like, well, I don't know what they expect. And like this is before I knew anything. I'm going to add that. And like, they had to call in other art department people to fix it. And just like, that day, like, just in my, like, I will remember that feeling of not, because you're only as good as your last job. And that could have been my last job. It's not good. I wish I had like anything, because like, we all have bad days, but that was definitely the worst one.
Yeah. And then the entire rest of the time that you're dealing with that job, like you said, it's like you're covered in poop and people can't get away from you.
Yeah. And like, there have been other days where like I'm freezing, because we work outside, and like I've been rained on, it's been freezing. I've been out in 110-degree heat for like 12 hours a day.
Yeah. But those are more hard days than they are like bad.
Yeah. I mean, but like actually bad days, no. Like, not, thank God. Plenty of times I've been yelled at by a boss, but who hasn't?
Yeah.
It's I feel lucky to have not had anything like terrible happen.
Have you ever gone off on somebody?
I mean, everybody's yelled at a coworker. Yeah. Well, okay. Gone off on somebody on the set of On the Basis of Sex. We were shooting in front of the Supreme Court, right? So like, when you're shooting in DC, you have to be very aware of the fact that you're in DC, and security in DC is like not, there's a lot of it, and the closer you get to like the Capitol or the White House or whatever, like, you'll notice it, right? And we were in front of the Supreme Court, so already everybody was like, we cannot mess up this location, because Ruth Bader Ginsburg was going to visit set because the movie was about her life. So like everybody had to be on their best behavior. And anyways, I need to rewind. The first part of this day, we started in front of the Capitol, and it was, everybody's carrying these briefcases, and I found a briefcase just sitting on the ground, which, if you visit DC, you'll see a bunch of signs that say, if you see something, you say something. And the example is just like a briefcase on the ground, right? So, I just like point out this briefcase, and I'm like, whose is this? Who's this briefcase? And this one extra walks in. He's like, oh, it's mine. I'm sorry. I was just leaving there. I was tired of carrying it. I was like, okay, cool. What's that? And it was like, oh, it's the Capitol building. And it was like, cool. Do you think it's a good idea to leave a unattended briefcase in front of the home of Congress? And he was like, no, I guess not. I was like, so what are you going to do? And he's like, I guess I'm not going to do that. And I was like, all right, cool. Go away. And he ran away. So later in the day, a Supreme Court justice, right? Like somebody who gets, if not Secret Service protection, she has bodyguards. Like they'll prevent her from going places if they think it's too dangerous. And it starts raining. I've been on my feet all day, just like I'm tired. I want to go home and like sleep. And lo and behold, I find a briefcase standing before the Supreme Court. And I just started like screaming, like, whose is this? Whose briefcase is this? And then like, the same guy comes from the crowd. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's me again. And I lit into that guy. I was like, do you have any idea, like in front of the Supreme Court? Like I, this is a family podcast, so I will not use the 4-letter words I was using, but I used all of them. And like, I probably ruined that guy's day. People were looking at me because I was acting like a crazy person. Like, I'm not the hero of this story. I consider it like, this is my Dark Knight moment. Like, it's not the hero we want, but it's the hero we needed at that moment. And, he ran away, and, there's that. Yes, I have yelled at people, but like, it's not like, I'm just a guy. I'm not like some famous filmmaker. Like, I'm just a name in the credits,
Yeah. So if you were like a director, you think you'd be lighting people up like David Fincher?
No, I would no. And the reason why is because I don't want to be a director. Okay. Like I write stuff, I wrote this audio drama with my writing partner in New York, but like, and he directed a lot of it. And one of the things I've learned about myself, I don't have the attention span to be a good director. And like, bad directors have bad attention spans. I worked on a movie where a director was like on Facebook during takes. It's just like, dude, come on. Really? If no, you shouldn't yell at your coworkers. I felt bad about that. I mean, I didn't apologize to him. He did it in front of the Supreme Court. Like, he deserved that. That was a bonehead move. Like,
after he was told to. I mean,
yeah, I could have ruined everybody's day. It didn't. Everything went fine because he was carrying his briefcase. So I put the fear of God into them, and I'm just kidding. Anyways,
but I do want to segue into some of your other stuff too. I do want to give time for that. So you do have a website with different comics and stuff. I looked at those; they're pretty funny stuff.
Thanks.
I know you mentioned that you kind of wanted to do that originally.
One of the things that I do it for fun now. Like, when you're younger, like, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna be a frame. It's like, no. I do when I make comics or anything like that. I'm doing it for me. If you look on my website, you'll see that I made a comic that like can't run out of pages. I've done Irreverent Comics. I made a coloring book that's just like all black pages, which has been like a thing I sell at like little writing little comic book conventions. Is like, it's a good gag gift. I still love that one. It's called the Nihilists coloring book.
No, that's cool. So you'd consider it more of like a hobby?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I have that weird American thing of if I haven't gotten paid for it or professionally, I feel like you can't comfortably call yourself that, right? But at this point, it's a hobby. The audio drama I'm doing, with the amount of work I've been putting into that's like a full time job. We're not making any money off of it, but
I guess I will no longer call myself a podcaster.
no, you should. I mean, but isn't that what's kind of cool about the tools that we have today? Is that I've got a scanner that maybe 15 years ago you couldn't get a scanner of this size, just like next to my computer screen right now. And with Photoshop, I can do post work on my comics and make them look very professional, so that when I get them printed, they look cool. It seems like every time we turn around, there are like more tools available to us than before. And just make what you can.
Especially with like iPad Pros. I know a couple people who have iPad Pros, and they're so used to like painting, and they get paid to do their work, but just like you said, those tools open so many doorways. And so what would be, you said you're not really great at any one particular thing, but where's the most of your passion at? Would it be in comics, or would it be in something else?
I mean, it's writing is like what I want to do. So my audio drama is called SPR. It's Superhuman Public Radio, and it's it's basically what would NPR. It's NPR meets the Marvel universe, right? So like, what would NPR sound like if superheroes were real? And we wrote the entire season, and it's kind of like it was effectively writing like a season of television, and it was really rewarding. And it's hard, dude. Writing is just like hard. And I've entered screenwriting competitions this year. I actually got a TV pilot I wrote as an official selection. So that feels pretty good.
Oh, wow.
If it happens, that'd be great. But it's a world full of very talented people vying for like a very small amount of jobs. So
Yeah.
I'm not holding my breath.
Well, I don't know. There's some people who are talented, who have written some rough stuff. Excuse me. So, I've voiced my opinions on the new Star Wars movies a lot, but on this podcast. But so who knows?
I will give you 2 years from this date, and you have to write me a Star Wars movie. It's just like, oh my god!
I got all these books. No, it's just
that's great.
They were given a lot of. I don't know. I think it could have just been handled better, but yeah,
everything can. It's a bummer. Like I liked the first two. The third movie I wasn't like too hot on, but you know what? Like, more Star Wars is better than less Star Wars. And also, how you're a real fan of Star Wars? You hate Star Wars. Like, that's how you're like, I love the first movie, I love the second movie, third one's trash, I hate the prequels. Or somebody's like, I love the prequels, everything else is garbage. Like, and you're all there's like two people that are like, I like the new movies. Everybody's like, shut up, show your movie. Like, but
Star Wars fans.
You know what, man? Like, we got new Star Wars movies. That's cool. We got The Mandalorian. That's cool. We're gonna get Kenobi. Like, that's awesome. Like, we're lucky. Come on, man. Like, we're so lucky with the amount of stuff that's coming out. Like, we got the Avengers. Could you imagine if you went back in time and you told your kid self, you're like, there's going to be 30 Avengers movies, and they're actually mostly going to be pretty cool. And they're going to like do Thanos. And then you're going to be like, what's Thanos? And you're going to be like, I know. Right. And like, the movie's actually going to be like fairly good. And you're going to like kind of get weepy seeing like Spider-Man on a unicorn. You'll be like, no, are you high? Like, who are you? Random homeless man who's telling me weird things. And then like, Yeah, like we have so many awesome, like, God, the world's awesome now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I
It's,
definitely understand what you're saying.
yeah.
No, what's really cool, which I thought would be never possible, what it looks like they're doing with both DC and Marvel, the multiverse.
Oh, dude, I am so down for that. Unpopular opinion, I am psyched for the Snyder Cut. I want to see how bananas crazy that movie is going to be.
Yeah, and
And,
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, I was going to say, like, the people that I worked with on Wonder Woman, like, that's like this one movie crew that's just been jumping from, like, they had been jumping from like DC movie to DC movie to DC movie.
Oh wow.
And they're like, it's crazy, it's awesome, it's going to be ridiculous. So, I'll take interesting over, technically good any day, right?
Yeah, yeah, and then it'll be coherent. English. It'll be coherent with the
Coherent.
rest of the movie. It'll make sense, which I agree with you there. I'm looking forward to seeing that as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Again, like, what a cool time to be alive.
Yeah, I'm a little worried that I was a little worried. Maybe you heard something different. That Snyder Cut's not going to be that different than the Justice League, the original.
We're not going to know until you see it.
Yeah,
If I had to get, well, like, I don't know, man. I think that it's just going to be weird. Zack Snyder's such a kooky guy. Like, and I mean that in the sense of, like, he has, like, such a weird storytelling sense
yeah,
where you can tell, like, he watches anime, but he also really loves the comics he grew up with, but will research the comics a lot. And, like, is it exactly what I wanted from the DC movies, or, like, no, but is it a really neat take on it? Like, yeah, like, I want them to, like, I hope that movie comes out. I hope it does well, and I hope they bring back more, because, again, unpopular opinion, I think Ben Affleck's the best Bruce Wayne we've ever had. Anybody can be Batman. Anybody can put on that mask. Bruce Wayne is a weird dude, and, like, crazy, angry Republican Batman is like, yeah, I'm here for it. He was the best in my opinion.
yeah. I have to disagree with you, but we all have opinions. So.
Again, like, nobody's right. Here's
Yeah.
the thing: we're also going to get, like, Robert Pattinson being, like, a super weird Batman, and we might even get Michael Keaton back as Batman, like, in Flashpoint in the Flash movie. Are you kidding? Like, that's awesome. Like, the amount of weird stuff we're going to get is great.
Yeah, and the willingness to be creative like that and to do the kooky things that are in the DC comics. I think they were kind of afraid for a long time to go out of the formula. The Chris Nolan films were stuck very close to real life, as far as, what could be theoretically possible. They didn't make Bane, this super, like, he was a super soldier of sorts, but he wasn't, like, pumped up full of venom like he is in the comics. They made it a very down to earth kind of style, and I like those movies. Don't get me wrong, but they just played it safe for a long time, and I think they're finally realizing, because of Marvel, hey, we could do crazy stuff and
Yeah, man,
do it well.
I'm here for it. I want all of that.
Yeah.
I actually want, like, a Booster Gold movie. Like, let's get weird. Let's do Animal Man. Why not? Like the Jeff Lemire run.
Well, I think the Guardians of the Galaxy was less mainstream, and that I think that worked out really well.
Well, even, like, if you think it's weird, like, the movies are getting weirder, but also, like, more serious.
Yeah.
I'm bummed that we're not going to get a second Black Panther with
Yeah.
Chadwick Boseman, especially because, like, the first one was, like, oddly prescient of a very modern day superhero movie dealing with, what's like to be Black in America. Like, that's great. I don't know if we'd get that, like, if the movie had been made, like, 5 years earlier, or
Yeah.
maybe even later. And, I'm psyched for WandaVision.
Mm-hmm.
I assume you guys are pretty big comic fans.
I'm not a comic fan. I'm more of like a comic book movie fan.
awesome, dude. Totally fine. Like the movies are awesome, but like WandaVision looks like it's borrowing from Tom King's Vision comic, which is well worth your time. It's
Really?
so weird. It's just like it's Vision makes his own family and then wants to live in the suburbs, but might destroy the world. It's anything by Tom King is awesome.
I'll have
So
to
you
check it out.
should check that out.
Yeah.
Comic Rec, hot off the presses for a comic that's like 3 years old. Yeah.
Definitely. I did want to end with your story about your dog escaping through the window, which I've considered a few times. So, how did that happen?
Oh my god, dude! Like this is okay. So, I had just finished working on Wonder Woman. My wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was like, "I want a dog," and I'm like, "Okay, yes." And she found this dog, that like, he was like thin, he had patchy fur, and I was like, that looks like a pit bull. And she's like, no, he's not. He's not a pit bull. And like, she brings the dog home, and I'm like, that is a pit bull. And she's like, yeah, he's a pit bull. And he was crazy and really manic, and he didn't like, being in his like crate. And we were like, oh, we'll put a blanket on it, and I put this blanket that I'd had since I was like 13 on it, and he like tore it to shreds. It's like, thinking about like when I was going to get rid of this dog. And we got him a soft crate, and we're like, maybe this is the solution, right? And on the day that my sister was going to have her C-section, we were able to test the soft crate for the first time, which by the way is a terrible idea. Don't buy a soft crate. It's not, just don't. And we're sitting there, my sister's drugged out of her mind because she just had a baby sliced out of her body. Family's all together. I'm holding my brand spanking new nephew. And, I look at my girlfriend, wife, then girlfriend, whatever. I'm going to say wife. Anyways, I look at her and I'm like, I'll bet you that dog will have Looney Tunes his way out of the crate. And she's like, don't even joke about that. And, we start talking about the dog, and we were mentioning like, because he came with the name Spencer, and we were like, I don't know if I like that name. And, she had to leave because she was going on a yoga retreat with her mom. So, I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to hang out with this baby. She leaves. 20 minutes later, I get a phone call, have the baby in one hand, and I answer the phone with the other. I'm like, hey, his wife's calling. And I was like, hello. And all I hear is, I'm like, great. The dog's dead, right? Like, there's no other thing that could happen. Then the next words out of her mouth is, the dog has escaped out of the window. And I was like, oh. And I looked at my family, I was like, the dog has escaped out of the window. I'm like, you better go. And I was like, I think I shall. And I just handed the baby back over, and I like broke every speed limit on the way home. She sounded like she was crying. And I get to the house, and I can see in the window the wire mesh has been like, it looks like something's exploded, out from it. And, I get into the house, and, wife's there. She's been crying, and she's holding the dog, who just looks confused. And what we learn is that she had gotten home, and she looked at the soft crate, and there's a hole in it. And she was like, oh, well, that's not good. And she looked over to the window, which was behind the couch, and the window had been opened. And he had jumped out of it. He had just opened he had also chewed his way out of the blind. So there's this like dog-shaped hole, from the blind leading out.
Looney Tunes style.
Like Looney Tunes style. She ran to the end of the block, panicked, calling after him, and was like, it was calling out. And while she's telling the story, it's like, wait, what's the name he responded to? And she said Spencer. And I was like, that's his name, because by the way, I'd signed that dog's adoption papers the day before. He has no idea how lucky he was. It's like, that's the dog's name. We're not naming everything else. she was like, okay, I'm going on my yoga trip. Bye. So I just like sat in my living room looking at this hole in the window. Which, by the way, those blinds not fixed. Still just this big dog shaped hole in them. And he, oh my God, we checked. He looked at every window in the house looking for an unopened one. And he had also, because my wife had all these plants on the second story window in her office. He had knocked all those away. He could have just like died. That could have been it. That was the end dispenser right there. I mean, I love that dog to pieces. I would never have any other dog, but if it had been one more day, oh my God, gone.
That kind of sounds like the story of my horse, that every time we would put him in a fence, he would just jump over it and just sit on the other side of it because didn't like being put in.
Oh, I was about to say, you left your horse in the living room? That seems like a terrible idea.
I should tell it that way.
Yeah.
Well, John, Jack, Mr. Dorsey, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. We had a
Hey, this has been a lot of fun. And,
Yeah.
I like telling people about the industry, new myths, debunking some. So I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I hope you have a good rest of the day. And if you want to come back on, you're more than welcome. Even if you want to just come and talk about another movie with us, like we usually do. you're more
Sure.
than welcome.
Yeah, maybe at some point. Do you mind if I plug my show?
Go ahead.
All right. If you like audio dramas, look up SPR, Superhuman Public Radio. It's NPR meets the Marvel Universe.
Awesome. Superhumanpublicradio.com, right?
Yes.
All right. Go and check it out. Looks like you're cooking up something really good. So I'll go ahead and close the show. Logan?
Well, enjoy your nap because that's what I'm going to go do.
Oh my God. I'm just both eyes on the couch right now.
So, take care, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.